thank you for being here on time. Ready and raring to go. But not very attentive.
I did make some updates to the document last night. So,
yeah, there were. Should we show them?
Yeah, it might be
okay.
there.
Yeah. So, not everybody stopped working last night. We noticed with Edmund that we had some updates to our crowdsourced document. He's gonna show us in a second. So thank you for all of those who were that active. Some of them are really quite good. Let's see. That one. Congratulations. That was really a big one. And there were a couple of others. I think Skype got added. Yeah. Content management is another good one.
Some examples.
Yeah. And there's some down at the bottom too, I think. On the second one. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, less physical interaction between clients and the library. I think that's, and the need for lifelong learning, which is why we're all here today. I know that's why I'm here. And some people are on this morning too, so it's nice to see. Good. Excellent. Excellent. So we're gonna start off this morning in our we're back to Sunnyland, and this is to make you feel a little bit warmer. So we're in Sunnyland, and it's summertime, not winter. Now we can go all the way to the last slide.
Do you want to be crystal?
Yeah, well, maybe a little bit. Okay. We left yesterday giving you an assignment, a thought assignment, to think about the elements that you might have to be considering when you're doing strategic planning, whether it's for a project or for your library or for the Parliament. This morning, we are going to do a little bit of a role play. Now, I know that there are some individuals that maybe we want to make sure you have a partner. You need one partner. So can everybody choose a partner? Now, ideally, I would like you to choose a partner from another institution. So it would be great if you could just turn around and find a partner opposite you. Okay? Now, if you do not have an opposite partner that you can communicate with, so everybody find your partner, turn around. Okay? Okay? Great. So does everybody have a partner that they can talk with? Not yet. Okay, so maybe, I think you're going to be partners, okay? And partner, you can partner across. You've got a partner. Matilda and Bobby, you've got a partner. Simon is, okay? Okay, so everybody has a partner. Esther, you need a partner? Okay. And you need a partner? Well, they're your partners. Perfect. Okay. And I need a helper. Where's my helper? Edmund. I need a helper. Okay. You can go on that side.
Oh, hand them out, yes.
Okay. Maybe around the edges. Okay. So one person from each of your groups. I need you to raise your hand. Just one of your couples. Okay, so this is okay, and you are going to become a very powerful person. You're a very powerful person, and you are a very powerful person. Matilda, you are empowered. Simon, okay, so you're empowered. Who would like to be the empowered person? Simon. You are empowered. You're with Moira? Okay. Oh, wait a minute. No, you're with Michelle. Oh, you're with You're a partner? Okay, so you're the empowered person. Oh no, then Moira, then we have an extra. Here. Can you go Can you partner with Seychelles? And you guys partner? You're empowered. You're empowered. Okay. So your assignment now is you have somebody who's been working on the strategic plan, and you have an empowered person that you have met in the elevator, in the lift. You're in the lift with a very powerful person. And you're in the middle of you're at the climax point of your strategic planning. And you realize this is your opportunity. You can convince this really powerful person to be on board. Okay? You have 5 minutes to make your pitch to your very powerful person. You're in the lift. The doors are closing. It's just the two of you. And you have 5 minutes. Go. Okay? Okay? So you meet. So you're the DJ, and you're making. And talk to this Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for your active participation in this exercise. I think it was fun. Could someone who was a very powerful person volunteer your impression of this exercise, of how was it for you? A very powerful person. Yes. Is it Madam Speaker or Madam Chief Whip? What was your position?
I was a very powerful chair of the administration committee, and I met in the lift while I was going to a meeting.
Edmund? And whom did you meet in the lift?
I met the chief librarian of the Parliament of Zambia.
Ah.
And he convinced me that he needs to buy tablets for the members of Parliament.
Okay.
Because they have these very ambitious project of disseminating information to members of Parliament They have been digitizing their information, but disseminating the same has been a great challenge, and they are looking forward to ways of how they can actually disseminate that information, and they have identified the tablet as one of the means that they are going to use to disseminate this information to members of parliament wherever they are, wherever they can access internet facilities.
Well, Madam Chair, it sounds like you were very convinced of this argument.
Yes, I certainly was convinced. And I even asked him how much he thinks it's going to cost him. And he says it's gonna cost about 100,000 US dollars. So we got into a consensus because it's a 5-year plan that we can face it and do part of it. He convinced me because he says he has the infrastructure already. So I thought it is a viable project which my committee can try and lobby the budget committee to make sure that it is put in the budget.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Mr. Chief Librarian, what were some of the, how did you feel in this situation? What were some of the challenges and some of the successes that you experienced?
I think some of the challenges have had to do with, as I met this powerful Madam Chair of Admin Committee, I highlighted to her that in as much as we already have a part of the infrastructure for the ongoing digitization project, a few challenges have to do with the equipment sometimes failing to function. So the budget proposal also factored in the aspect of servicing the equipment. Yeah, but I think the number one success so far is that the project has been going on smoothly. The few challenges have been manageable.
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for sharing. How about another powerful person? Hiba. Could you identify your position, please, madam?
Chair of the Library Committee.
Very nice to meet you. Could you tell us about your elevator experience?
I met Amina from Kenya, from the library. She is a librarian in the research service department. She tried to convince me for many challenges that they meet in their library. She wants to raise the standard of the manpower in the library. She wants capacity building in many branches, like training courses. She wants to have many outside visits to see the equivalent libraries in another parliaments. She wants another partner, international partner or regional partner, to help in funding, because I told her that the budget doesn't allow all she needs. So I told her that I have to find another international partner or something like that to help us. She tried to convince me that the management is far from their needs, and I told her that I'll let her voice reach to them.
Okay.
For decision maker.
Okay. Okay.
She also she talked about the public access, that she wants that all the draft. She wants the public to see the negotiations in the committees, not only in the session, the public session. She said that they want the public, all public, to see that how the committees are
working.
Yes, are working.
Their decision. Wonderful, wonderful. So chief librarian, is that your
yes.
position? Okay.
Chair of the library committee.
Chair of the library committee, and you were talking with the chief librarian. Yes, from Kenya. Yes. Could you share with us your perspective on your discussion?
Okay. I met with this powerful chair of the library committee, and I had to convince her about our challenges which I face normally in my library. So one of the challenges was funding. Yes.
Okay.
I convinced her to be part of our strategic plan so that she can assist us with some funding, especially for the training, whereby the staff can be motivated to go for trainings and get experience so that they can take back home and try to work on that experience.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. How about another powerful person? Yes, Simon. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I am a Director General.
Your microphone.
Director General of the planning department of the Parliament.
Oh, very powerful.
And I was on my way to the Board of Management meeting.
Oh, how fortuitous!
And I was not in a lift. I was in the corridor. When I met a person in one of the departments of library.
Okay, you don't remember the position of that person?
I don't remember the position, but he is in charge of the library and research. And since I am the Director General of the Department of Planning, he had wanted to buy me to buy his idea of planning for library services. So he mentioned to me that he wanted to establish a modern legislative service through providing library information services for excellence, which I asked him how he measures modernity and how he measures excellence. He found out that he was not going anywhere, and he introduced, actually he delayed me for the meeting.
Oh my!
Then he changed, he wanted, he convinced me that he was going to provide, the Parliament to be the fastest legislative service that provides excellent information services that meet the needs of the public. Somehow I tried to buy his this idea, but since I was late, I told him to come to follow me later after the meeting in my office.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Director, or Director General. I'm so sorry. Is it the gentleman who? Yes. Okay. So, just if you want to share how you felt when you could see that time was ticking away, he's late for his meeting. How did you feel?
Frustrated. Yeah, because I think he didn't get exactly what I was telling him. Yeah.
Sometimes it's not just that you actually have two different languages, but sometimes it's about speaking different languages, right?
Yeah,
You're speaking the language of the
But
library, they're speaking the language of...
Yeah, but the conclusion was that in order to provide an efficient service to the members of parliament and to the general public, we should modernize our services using technology. This was the conclusion.
Okay, so you did have a conclusion that you were happy with. Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, it turns out that we are actually recording our sessions, okay? I would like to provide an opportunity, if there's any couple, powerful person and strategic planner, who would like to actually come up and replay your interchange. Is there anybody who would like to? And then, if you would like to do that, we'd like to put it up on the section YouTube. So that those who were not here for this session could benefit from your experience. Is there anybody who would like to do that? Not on YouTube. Not on YouTube. Okay. 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 Well, if there's anybody who would like to do that, we can do it later too. Okay, so do you want to, you were the powerful person?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm the speaker.
Oh, good, Madam Speaker. It's an honor.
I will do my best. As they know, the big problem in this is the budget. And it is not for the library only, it's for all the parliament. Because of this, I will do my best to find what they want. And I promise them to do all my best.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And your library was partner from Seychelles? Yes. So how did you feel about making your pitch to Madam Speaker? That must have been very, very stressful for you. Microphone. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I met her in the elevator, and I didn't know what to tell her because there were so many activities, there were so many things we wanted to do in the library, and I started waffling at first to explain what exactly we wanted, and then I ended up talking about digitization, and then somehow I got lost in the hall. And then she was looking at me and expecting me to explain myself, and then I went on and on about the budget, about technology, and it was everything in just like 2 minutes talking, because I had very limited time to explain what I wanted.
And she was probably looking at her watch.
Yes, and she was, and
yeah, reading her smartphone.
It was very stressful.
Yes, yeah. Anybody else who would like to share? Yes, that's it.
I am the chair of the library committee, and I was convinced by the deputy speaker of the Taiwanese assembly. So I met this active, powerful lady in the elevator. I've never met her so active and stressed before. But what she was trying to convince me on is that since the library committee is consisting of researchers, learners, especially church leaders and traditional leaders, the MPs have been pressing her that people are not hearing them, and especially the traditional leaders and the learners. So this deputy speaker came to me and said that urgently she has a budget, like a surprise, so the capacity must be improved and extended, and the library is too small. She needs much more, and she needs an urgent budget from me to improve it. So since I had the base of the library committee from the community, from the grassroots level people, I accepted her persuasion, and we're going to move on. My deputy chairperson is my lady behind me.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. And does anybody want to, I know we mixed that group up a little bit.
Yes.
But does anybody else want to say from the other side of the argument, who was making the pitch? do you want to give your perspective on? Was it difficult to speak with?
Yes, right. We also had within our conversations. We met also the budget chairperson of the budget committee. So it was all a nice conversation, but so loud because we were all ladies wanting to persuade one another. So, but it was all good. So I'm gonna listen back to them.
Well, as the chair of the budget committee, firstly, I asked them whether they would teach me as well how to use the digitized documents and materials, because the chief librarian for the Taiwanese Parliament Library was trying to convince me that they want to digitize their documents. But then I told her, I actually don't know how to use those digitized documents. What are they talking about? So I asked her, if I put up this on their behalf in our committee, what are they going to do about the rest of the parliamentarians? Are they going to teach them how to access those documents? Thank you.
Very, very important. Very important. Thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else? Yes? Joe?
Yes. I'm Director General.
Director General?
Yes.
Okay. Sir.
My librarian report her strategist plan to me. Her plan is a three-factor. A strategist plan has a three-factor. One, to make digitizers in the library materials, and then to improve staff ability by the ways of trainings. And then after the training and digitizers library material, she can give the more effective ways of services to MBs and develop the staff.
Okay.
Yeah. So I make the meeting with House of Administrative Committee and Budget Committee. And
right
then,
on the spot, you said, yeah. I will make these committee meetings. Nice.
And then I decided above the two factors. The two committees totally agreed, no? To allow the budget for my librarian. The strategist plan can improve the ability of staff skill, and to affect after digitizers we can give, because nowadays modernized age we need to change the digitizing.
So that's really, you made a very, very convincing argument, it seems, to your Director General. Congratulations.
Thank you.
With results in the elevator. Excellent. Shaima. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
I think he was very receptive from the beginning, and he was actually very pleased that I was trying to talk to him about the library. So I guess he practically gave his full support. So it was wonderful. The 5 minutes just went by, but I think I managed to convince him what the library needs, and he was very agreeable. So I think we had a good chat.
Excellent. Yeah. Excellent.
We had an interpreter, by the way. She
okay.
explain things.
Good. Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah.
Who was the powerful person?
I am.
You, okay, we'll start with it. We'll start with the perspective.
Yes, Madam Clerk of the House.
Madam Clerk.
I met the librarian from Ghana, and he was trying to convince me about the library. We recently launched the digitalization project, and he was trying to tell me that they are lacking storage facilities, especially the CDs. And he was telling me that, you know what, the information they have, they need to preserve it. They need to a backup position, and they need about 200 CDs. And they cost about $3,000. And he really convinced me that it is very important that we get up a backup position. The other issue was the seating capacity in the library.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
Small.
they would want to increase the chairs and the tables for the members and other users who come to the library. Because we didn't really have a lot of time, I told him that we should bring in his proposal to me when we have enough time so that we can discuss further. But I think it's a good...
Great, great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Sir.
Thank you very much. I met the clerk to Parliament in Uganda, and I actually tried to put forward the challenges that our Parliament is facing in terms of the library facilities, and I tried to convince her how she can actually assist us in terms of that. But I realized that she didn't have time, and she was just in a hurry, so I tried to make a very snappy points to her, and I was glad that she actually bought into my proposal and asked me to submit a proposal for future discussion.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, congratulations. I think, you know, I hope that this exercise has been helpful for you to understand the perspective of the people that you might have to convince to get on board. Okay? Just to recap some of the things that I heard in your telling of your experience, that it's important that you can recognize that the powerful person may be your ally, but also may be able to find other allies, to identify for you who, you know, yes, I'm interested, or you can make your pitch to me, but really, I'm not the one who's going to make the decision, but I can put you in touch. I can be your ally with that major decision maker. I think it was very, very important. Somebody mentioned about identifying the problems. You know, that it wasn't just the budget for purchasing, but it was service and maintenance. You know, that you've been thinking about the long-term plan, and it's not just about the flashy ideas. It's about the long haul, the maintenance of those things. It was interesting for me to how many of you mentioned that you had many challenges. What do you think is the most important thing about this exercise? Prioritization. Exactly. You know, that you've got that 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 2 minutes. You've got to go for the jugular. You know, you've got to go for what is that most important issue that you want to bring to their attention. I think that also it was very interesting that, you know, budget plays a huge role. Many of you mentioned budgeting. But also you came up with, you know, that multi-year budgeting. Esther mentioned that, you know, maybe we won't be able to do the 100,000 this year, but if we can plan it over 3 years, then it might be possible. Or that you're going to find a regional ally that would be able to, or a development ally that would be able to maybe possibly fund, and that, you know, we'll need to bring on board somebody from the Foreign Relations Department so that they can help us identify, you know, major funders. I also thought that it was interesting that some of you mentioned that you will facilitate the path to those decision makers. You know, that, again, I'm not the one to make the decision, but I can put you in touch with them. Asking them to be a part of the strategic planning process. Even if it's just to keep them informed of how the process is ongoing. You've had that opportunity. It's so important to follow up. If they've said, for example, you know, this is a plan that we have, and send me your plan, you better be able to send it within the next day. You should have, you know, a one-pager that you can say, thank you very much for this very quick meeting that we had. According to our discussion, here is the budget for that plan, or here are the prioritizations of our strategic plan. Thank you very much, and we look forward to our next meeting, right? So making sure that the person can follow up with you. Making sure that they know who you are, right? Give them your card. How many of you gave them a card? Nobody. Right? Did you give a card? Okay, you did. Wonderful. Wonderful. Because, you know, it's important. You know, you need to make sure that they know who they've been talking to. They're not going to remember. They're going to say, yeah, I was in the elevator with I don't know, somebody from the library. I don't know who it was. Make sure that they'll be able to follow up with you, that they will remember who you are. I thought it was fascinating. Simon brought up the idea of making sure that you can talk about how you're going to measure. What an important idea. If somebody is, got multiple problems on their plate, they're going to want to know that you've thought about, not only do we have a project, but we know how we're going to measure it, and it's going to be, and we know how we're going to quantify excellence. Okay? Another thing that I heard is making sure that they understand how unique your service is. That this is really something that this institution will be proud of. I thought that was very interesting. To remember that you're not the only department seeking funds or seeking attention or seeking decision making. You're going to be one of many organizations within the institution that is going to be asking for attention. So that need to prioritize, that need to make sure that you're touching on the most important topic that you want this person to be on board with. I thought it was interesting to prove to that powerful person how important your clients are. I think it was this group here who said, that these are very important religious leaders and that they're very important community leaders, that it has a broader resonance of our service than just serving the members that are on board. I also thought it was interesting that you might find yourself in a group of powerful people. Maybe you're going on a study tour with your clerk and your deputy speaker. Then you've got more than an elevator 5 minutes. You've got, maybe a couple of days. When you're going on with those powerful people on a trip or into a meeting, really to remember that you have that opportunity to make your pitch. Also, I think it's important to remember that powerful people like attention too. They like to know that you are bringing them on board because of how important they can be to this project, and that they can be the face of this project in terms of others. And then I think another thing that I heard was how important it is to make sure that they understand your office, your department, your projects. As I think our colleague from Seychelles experienced, she said, I was waffling. I couldn't hone in on that most important thing right away. And so it's important to have this, we call it the elevator speech, right? To have the elevator speech ready. Practice it. Practice it with your colleagues. Make sure that if you find yourself in that situation, you'll be able to address it. And I think we've already had some results over here. We have a commitment from the clerk of Myanmar. So thank you very much for your active participation. Congratulations to everybody. And I think the schedule calls for tea. Isn't that a strange thing? So if you, where's Edmund? Are you, we're done. So Edmund is going to be leading our next session.
Yep.
But don't we
Are we breaking for tea first?
Do you want to break for tea or do you want to keep going? Keep going.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. So again, thanks to everybody.
That one. There we go. Good. And that pitch worked. So that was a digital library system that we implemented in April, May this year. And it was an interesting case study, both in the immediacy of selling that pitch and having your strategic plan ready to go, and in the out-of-box nature of a lot of the digital library systems that are available now, which is that the pitch could be delivered and the system delivered within a period of about 3 months, which met the criteria of the CEO who said, you can have a system, but I've got to be able to see it within 3 months of giving you the funding. And he got his system, and also a repository that represents the publications of the institution for the first time in one consolidated area. So these sorts of things are quite critical to actually having your ideas together already and workshop within your own organisation of what are the critical projects that you want to angle for over time and taking the opportunities when they come. And this all fits into the role, the changing role of the library. And one of them is the library as a digital publisher in a number of different ways. For the parliamentary library, we saw obviously yesterday the different sorts of things that are being stored in repositories. The Acts of Parliament, minutes, e-books, and other digital resources and publications of the Parliament. And the importance of this is more than just for a period of one sitting of Parliament. It's that longitudinal view, that over-the-horizon planning for the management of those documents over the long term. And this is something that libraries are good at, and web developers are not necessarily good at. I've seen in many cases the putting of these sorts of documents within a library or an institutional intranet or even on their external website, and with different generational changes of that website, many of the documents are lost. So people have linked to those resources, people are using those resources actively, but the web developers do a redesign of the website. They might change the domain name or the link location, and people who've been using those resources over time lose access to those resources. So the role of a digital library can be to consolidate those resources in one place that's discoverable over the long term. And long term means that what you're selling is not just a commitment for this term of Parliament, but a commitment for infrastructure to keep that going over the long term. But the beginning of that infrastructure becomes a major asset for the library, as important as the book collection. And in that context, the role of the librarian as a, so to speak, techno-librarian, as an information architect for the organisation becomes important as well. Because the success of the implementation of a digital library depends a lot on conceptualising properly the types of information that you will capture, the metadata, the way in which that metadata will be discoverable by people, so that when the information goes in, the members and the stakeholders who can make use of that information can benefit over the long term. Yes?
I understand the meaning of digital library, but as a digital publisher for whom? Is it?
So the library can be a publisher in a number of ways. For one, publications of the Parliament itself, Acts of Parliament, Minutes of Parliament, work of the committees, but also other things such as profiles of members. This is all putting up information in digital form. It can include, for instance, media releases by members of Parliament, which are consolidated in the one place. Media releases from members of Parliament may be published via email, they may be published via blogs, or various other ways on a website for the member's party, or it might be on a government website if the media release is via a departmental source for a minister. And
I think I understand why Heber is querying that,
yes.
because the library is not the publisher of an act. The Parliament is. But the library is the... Exactly.
Yes.
So we are never authorising these documents as the... We're not the person who says this is an accurate expression of what the Parliament said. But we are often the people who enable that take an authorised version of an act and make it accessible. So publisher is maybe not quite the right word, because to me a publisher is the person who's saying, I am responsible for this and this is correct. And that is not our role in our parliaments. But our role is to provide access digitally to those documents. So the documents are authorised by somebody else, but we make them accessible. Does that help?
Yes. That's probably true. I mean, the Parliament is the publisher, but the vehicle of publication can be provided by the library. It may be provided by other areas of the Parliament as well, but it is a role that the library can take over. There are benefits for the library taking a responsibility in that area, and one of those benefits is that longitudinal view that the library has over the content that they manage, because publishers themselves can have a fairly short-term view. In print publications, for general publications, they'll have a run for a period of time, and then they'll pulp the residue of what's unsold, for instance. Libraries, as curators of publications, can have that view over the horizon for the preservation for more than one parliamentary term. Yep.
In the Parliament of Uganda, the library is charged with the responsibility of uploading documents on the members' iPads. Would that sense imply we are publishing? In the electronic sense?
Yes, I guess that's the ambiguity of what you mean by publishing. I think that means you are acting as a distributor of the content or as a publisher, but I guess you can take that term in either way.
I think that word distributor is probably an easier term for us to understand, because certainly distributor is that implication about access. And the other area that I would add in terms of what you're saying, parliaments are quite good at keeping things long term.
Yes.
They don't, so that's not really a problem in a parliament. But the problem is there's still things like the metadata and the organisation of the information and the structuring of the data to help people to find things, because we know what questions they ask and how they want to look for it. So many of you yesterday were talking about the challenges of metadata. So this is moving into the, it's the electronic equivalent of what you did when you were cataloguing the documents. So it is about structuring and organising the documents electronically so that they are easy for people to find. And we understand that because we have spent so many years looking for those documents ourselves. So that role of, I think that role of distributor has a better feel in terms of we're not authorising the documents, we're making them accessible.
Yes.
And we're making them more accessible, not just they're there, but they're findable and they're easy to find.
Yes. Now, as an information architect, there's more than just storing a document, more than just putting a link on a website. So while there's technological platforms you can use, including web content management systems where you can make a document nominally available on the web, there's a process of information architecture design for that long-term over-the-horizon planning for that document distribution or publication that's quite critical to the effectiveness of the discovery of that document in modern platforms. So there are now many established low-cost digital library systems, both commercial and open source. The difference between commercial systems and open source is quite marginal these days. A commercial system is a system provided by a software house that owns the copyright and the means of distribution of that software. Open source is nominally software for which the source code is provided, but the most important aspect of open source is it's license free. You can deploy open source systems to the best way that suits your organisation, and I'll talk a little bit about that further later. But whether you're talking about commercial or open source software, the software is only one component of the solution. The most important component of the solution of building a digital library system is the information architecture design, the metadata design, the methodology for the workflow for capturing that metadata that you build in implementing that system. So the software is actually, in many ways these days, the easiest component of the implementation. The software, commercial or open source, is quite low risk because we're talking about mature software. That is, these systems have been around for 15 plus years, have evolved to many generations of development. DSpace, for instance, an open source digital library system that many of you know about, is in its 5th major version, over 15 years old, and is very stable, very well known. The methods for implementation are very well understood. So what you're talking about with digital library software and with most major library systems is a platform which is low cost and low risk. That is, there's out-of-the-box solutions, be it commercial or open source, that are available, that can be self-installed or can be installed via various hosting providers in different countries in different situations. But the technology is not an end in itself. Buying the software doesn't solve anything for your library until you, as a library, conceptualize the sorts of information, the structure of the information that goes into that platform. And that process is part of that overall implementation process for any IT project. Now, I think you will be receiving, as part of this satellite session, a copy of the Handbook for Information and Communication Technologies in Parliamentary Libraries. And this document provides an overview of the standard processes for the ICT build, the Information and Communication Technology build, for different well-known core library processes. That includes your library management system for the management of your print and physical publications, for your digital library system, for ideas about social media, for repository design and so on. It doesn't document the specifics of implementing any one platform, but ICT projects typically follow a standard cycle of build and development. And the highest risk in going into any ICT project is lacking an understanding of what you're trying to achieve. So yesterday we talked about the vision for the Parliament itself and the vision for the library. And when you venture into the build for a digital library platform, building that business case, understanding what your goals and expectations are, and that means understanding what the type of platform you're trying to deliver to your members of Parliament, to your stakeholders, needs to be developed first before you venture into the specifics of the technology. And the other aspect of any project that you undertake is that risk analysis. What needs to go on to the system? What are the risks of this platform if it fails? What are the risks of the project if it fails? If I have my Acts of Parliament in this platform, am I ensuring accessibility particularly during key times of parliamentary sitting times. Is my infrastructure suitable for delivery of it, so that members of Parliament can reach the system via whatever technology platform, mobile devices, Blackberries, or whatever devices are currently being used in Parliament? What are the risks of accessibility to the information architecture that I'm building? So these are standard ICT build processes that the library will be participating in. They're not an issue of being a technician, they're an issue of being a project manager of any implementation of this sort. The second step is that one of project management, that is formulating a team who will take responsibility for the project to shepherd it through. And again, they don't have to be technical. They have simply really to understand what the goals of this specific project are, and to work with and develop a project plan so that everyone understands through to the completion of the project how things are progressing. Many things go wrong in IT projects. Many things are reconceptualized. The projects go wrong mostly through differences of understanding of expectation as the project evolves. And when you run into hurdles, those hurdles are more or less problematic according to how well they're communicated, so that as changes of expectation adjust over time, everyone is brought along with the project to understand what is working and what is not working, because IT projects are fraught with various issues in time and delay, in the architecture not being adequate to what you're trying to do, in changes of what everyone wants to achieve in the project. And changes are fine as long as they're communicated to all the stakeholders so that there's a consensus and understanding. Problems are the worst problems when they come as surprises. And when there are issues that arise, if the development of that issue, the evolution of that issue is understood by all the players involved, all the key stakeholders, then the issues around that are less problematic to all the parties involved. So discuss all scope changes and keep everyone informed. And finally, with implementation, and in your project plan, one of the key aspects, of course, is always training. To remember that a system is only as good as the human resources are there and able to make good and effective use of the system. So that training should be part of the original conceptualization of the implementation of the system. How are we going to implement the system? Well, it's not just a matter of that the technology runs, or even that you put documents in the digital library, but also that there's people there who understand how it operates, and an ongoing plan for the human resources around the management of that system. So some of that is outlined in that workbook on pages 25 to 26. And what I thought we'd focus on this morning is around the digital library, the design of the metadata that goes into the repository, because that's intrinsically the underlying value of the repository is the document stored in it and the metadata that helps you know what it is, how it's discoverable, and who it can be shared with. So a typical digital library system can have a whole range of content stored in it. Some libraries put images or video or acts of parliament or minutes of committees or member profiles. There's a whole range of things that have perhaps a digital document associated with it, or more than one digital document, and also some information about that document that helps the discovery of that document. So when we talk about metadata, it's the descriptive information: who authored that document, what the title is, what other variations of title might be. It might be different language variations of that title, so that people can discover that document in multiple different language contexts. but it also can be some discovery metadata. So that can include subjects, it can include dates of publication, it can include additional subjects member metadata, like any members who are referenced in the publication, so that the information is discoverable.
Yesterday, the generation of metadata was one of the challenges a number of colleagues pointed out in their presentation. And we're wondering whether there's a practical solution for documents that have been uploaded in PDF format.
Yes.
Could you assist us understand if the technology is around that can help us generate metadata?
Good, yes, okay. This is actually a common conundrum. In fact, many libraries, when they're starting a digital library, have a collection of documents to begin with. And that collection of documents may have information about the author and the title and the publisher associated with them, or they may not. They may come from a website, or they may come from a folder file system from which there's a whole range of documents associated with it. So the understanding of your source of documents is quite an important one. And the analysis of those documents is also quite important. So I'll come to that question in a minute, because it's quite a critical one. So your metadata comprises descriptive metadata, which is about the document, the author, the title, the specific publisher, the date of publication, any other information that's important around the document. The semantic metadata, which is things like the subjects, and sharing metadata for harvesting. So when we talk about harvesting, it's the method by which you can share your collection with other people who themselves can make use of that metadata. An example of that, for instance, is a digital library for the High Court of Australia, which has the legislative outcome from the Australian High Court published through DSpace and harvested by various online legal databases, so that they take copies of the original publications using that harvesting methodology. So this is legislation the result of legislative processes or parliamentary processes or legal processes, which are captured perhaps through original data entry. They then in binary form, and they also have really good metadata associated with them, where they've been captured in a structured way. And once they're there and in your digital library, they can be made accessible more than via the website. So when you think about a digital library, these days you're thinking about more than just a web place where people can go and find something on your system. It can be a vehicle to distribute that information to others that might be consolidating that information in other sorts of ways. So harvesting is simply a way of someone pointing to your collection and reusing that collection in other sorts of ways. So other examples of harvesting are taking Acts of Parliament from multiple parliaments and consolidating them together to have a regional parliamentary search hub for legislation.
Another example of good harvesting might be where a country would harvest the legislation from the national parliament and also the region and state parliaments. Other metadata that's really critical in a parliament would be which house, whose business it was, and also the date is really, really critical. It's always, when was it discussed in Parliament? You would also typically have things like the members' names are very important, and maybe their roles. So if a minister is speaking, you want to know which minister, which portfolio. Edmund, as I was listening to you talking about this, and just, you know, my experience in working with development parliaments on this critical area of metadata, it's complicated, and I don't think that anyone is going to be able to solve their metadata problems with this level of conversation. That what I would ideally like to see is that, and a number of you were talking about metadata, but you also, a number of you are using DSpace. So there's a lot of repositories with very common platforms. So my thoughts listening to you was it would be great to have a really specific workshop that was focused on metadata for DSpace, that was actually looking, that was really using the examples, looking at what people have got currently in their DSpace repositories and giving them advice about how to improve it. So, maybe that's an outcome that we would have out of this workshop as a recommendation for some follow-up capacity building that would be really specifically addressing the largest areas of problems. I'd have to say, Dr. Edmund, he wrote that handbook on ICT and parliamentary libraries. The day that I was really stunned, he was working with us in Myanmar. He arrived one morning and he said, last night I wrote a little program to translate from a Myanmar font called Zorji to a Myanmar font called Myanmar Sri. These Myanmar fonts are not readable by those of us who are not from Myanmar, so he couldn't read either of these fonts, but he could write a program to translate from one to another. So he's a hero in Myanmar. And I can't think of a better person to help us with this work because he knows a lot about DSpace. So my main suggestion, for further consideration from the floor, is that perhaps one of the outcomes is that we say we'd really, we don't need to solve how that happens, but if people agree that a workshop which was really focused on metadata, particularly for DSpace, the more specific we are, the easier it is to really address the difficulties that you're facing.
Yes. We will actually do an exercise in metadata development this morning too. And when we're talking about harvesting, I'll give you an example because this is quite important. What you build in your digital library repository is the germ of something quite bigger. An AUSTLI, AUSTLII, is a search service used by legal practitioners who can access the judgments from the courts and the Acts of Parliament and various other legal publications, and they harvest from all of the different institutions to get a consolidated search engine, which then becomes a valuable asset for the improvement of the legislative processes and the legal processes within the courts, because the lawyers themselves have access for the first time to those sorts of resources. When we set up DSpace in the Solomon Islands, that was interestingly talking with some of the lawyers, one of the most important aspects that they had out of the access to the gazetted judgments coming out of Parliament was their ability to access them for the first time to improve the presentation of cases within their court cases. So what you're building there in the initial stage is a resource that can greatly improve for the benefit of the members of Parliament, but when you build it, if you have an eye in building it to that wider role that it can have later on, to the sharing of the legislative experience regionally among other parliaments, then this concept of harvesting is a great tool to achieve that. And of course, in order to achieve that, adopting existing standards that are known in your region is important as well. Yes?
Hello, good morning. I'm Yoeta from Pan-African Parliament. In my library, we have installed archivalware for the digital repository. I don't know if you are familiar with the archivalware, and I would like to be harvesting information from the national parliaments, because we are a regional parliament.
Yes.
So I would like to harvest information, constitutional, legal policy information from the national parliaments. Can DSpace and archivalware work together? Thank you.
I'm not sure of the particular technology. So you would have to examine the software to look at its capability for harvesting. There's several ways with open source in which you can do that. If your specific digital library can't do harvesting, you may be able to implement something like DSpace to do that harvesting. Because it being license free, you can actually interpose that as a way of gathering information from other institutions. So I guess it's a matter of examining the software to see what its capabilities are. And this may be one of the points of evaluation for your system when you select the platform that you build with, be it DSpace or be it one of the commercial systems. There are many commercial around that are very high quality systems. Is when you pick that platform to think in the long term how its capabilities can be deployed. So you may not do harvesting in the first 5 years of your project, but the capability being there is something that you want to be bearing in mind when you build that digital library, because then you can share as part of a greater community. Chile has been very creative in implementing digital libraries within their parliament, and they use DSpace, but no one sees the web interface for DSpace. They use the harvesting and other tools within DSpace to surface the information there through other platforms that they've built. So the digital library may be simply a component to distribute the documents, and the web interface is merely one minor aspect of the software. So when you're thinking about the digital library system, it's to think more than a website. It's to think about a system for distributing and discovery of information that can grow over time and be shared over time in lots of new different ways. And information can come into your digital library from lots of different sources. It can come in via subscription services, perhaps to online journal publications or e-books or newspaper publications. It can come in via sort of direct data entry. I'm not sure what I had for IE. I think I was aiming for something else there. But that you can have it via direct submission into the digital repository. And we'll look at some of the metadata structuring for that sort of direct submission. It can be via scanning and OCR. To explain those terms, when you have a printed publication and you scan it through a scanner, you have an image, but you don't have any of the text associated with that document. And optical character recognition, or OCR, is a way of scanning that document and extracting the text from that document so that the text itself can then be used as well as the original publication. And there is good software that will do both of those at once. Although, as we discussed yesterday, there can be limitations in particular language contexts, the degree to which the OCR software recognises different language instances. It can be via simple workflow, which is that someone sits down and submits a document via the website. Or with DSpace, you can have a pre-prepared document with properties. So a Word document, for instance, has a lot of properties associated with it. That might be the author, it might be the title, the owner of the document, the publisher of the document, the date of publication. And that metadata is not directly visible within the document, but you can access it via the document properties. And if you create a standard Word format for people to create their documents, then all of that metadata can be fed into the repository as part of the submission process. So you don't have to then repeat adding that in as the metadata. So that's all metadata, and some of that metadata can be created in default Word documents so that when people are submitting documents, you get them to use a standard Word document template and put in those properties. That means also then that those properties are embedded within the binary document as well as in the metadata that goes into the repository. And this gets back to, I guess, one of the ways of capturing metadata in a consistent way with documents that go into the repository. And it can also be an important thing in terms of the copyright statement that goes into the document properties. So every document and every PDF has a set of properties. And those properties can actually be extracted during the process of ingestion into the digital library. So ingestion is that process just of putting it in. And there's two components to designing your digital library. One is what metadata do you need to capture? And we're going to have an exercise in discussing that shortly. And how do I get the metadata in? And there are a number of different ways to capture that metadata, but the process of validating that metadata is what's called the workflow. And when you build a system like this, the workflow systems are as important as the metadata, because the workflow systems are the ways in which you consistently and coherently validate that you're capturing things correctly. Anyone can use an online submission form, but you can design the ways in which it's submitted to ensure that your information goes into that digital repository in a complete and coherent way, so that it can later on be shared out in other more creative ways. But there's also other ways of gathering information, like automated harvesting from other systems. So you can point to another provider. It might be, for instance, a newspaper publisher who are themselves publishing newspaper articles that you want to capture, and you point directly to their website rather than capturing it, printing it, scanning it, and putting it into your system again, which is double entering all of the metadata. If they are already creating that as what we call born digital documents, then why should you repeat capturing that information if it's already there? So one of the discussions that we've seen happen with parliaments, even, for instance, in the Solomon Islands, is a discussion between the parliament and the news publishers to agree on a standard metadata definition so that the parliament can harvest the news articles that are relevant to themselves and then make them available to the local members. And the Northern Territory Parliament does exactly the same thing. So within Australia has a federal legislature and state legislatures, one of which is the Northern Territory. And the Northern Territory has an arrangement with the major regional publications, the Northern Territory News and a few others like that, to have those born digital documents. And most newspapers are born digital these days. In other words, they're created, they have all of the information associated, each of the articles is there separately. And if you can have an arrangement between the Parliament and the news publication publisher to gather those directly, then you can feed those straight into the digital library directly. So, yes?
Concerning the minutes of the plenary, there is a problem in the Egyptian parliament that we upload it as PDF and share it on the web page, but in the library we have a problem to make an analysis for it by name or by date or by MP's name. So which is better, to upload it as PDF for sharing and to make to use software like OCR to transfer it in another form to make analysis in it?
Well, normally with something like the Hansard or the minutes that are captured, it's actually good to try and work with the people who are capturing it originally so that you've got that born digital document at that time. And if you can change their workflow to incorporate a bit of that metadata in the document properties, then you can use that as you import it into the digital library directly. So when they create the PDF, if they can create the PDF with adequate document properties, then you can extract those automatically as that document goes into the digital library, and you save first of all, there's consistency because the people who create the document know best that sort of metadata information, that is the date, the Act of Parliament that it relates to, the members that it might relate to, and so on. So that can sometimes be a liaison between those who are capturing that information in the first place and create it. Do they create it? How do they create it at the moment? Is it?
We scan the paper,
yeah,
and we keep it. We upload it as a PDF. But we have a problem in the library how to analyze to make an analysis for it. But we have to.
But who types up that document in the first place? Because you must be scanning something that was. Is it typed up into some sort of electronic format in the first place?
Born digital. No.
Is it born digital?
No.
Yes.
No.
Or is it typed on?
Typed, yes.
On old mechanical typewriters?
Mechanical. Then you are originally. Then you are originally digital.
Yes. So you want to try and get the source material, the original digital document, rather than taking the output from that, which might be in printed form, and rescanning that. You can avoid a lot of errors by working with the people who originally captured that. Even as part of your project, perhaps ensuring that as part of your project, if they use a mechanical capture method, typing up on old mechanical type, that's less likely these days. Then you get the original born digital document rather than taking a secondary outcome of it and then recapturing it, which is repeating all the work of the original capture and having some of the difficulties you're already isolating, which is you've got to then try and reanalyze that document. So sometimes it can be talking with the original people and building their workflow up as well as your own.
I think it's more or less a similar challenge that Uganda is going through. We are talking of documents that are out of print.
Okay, yes.
You have no link with the original source. All you have is an old document that is even tatters, but you want to preserve it.
Yes, okay, good.
And you want to make reference to it.
Yes.
So you scan and upload.
Yes.
In a PDF.
Yes.
But then the challenge comes, how do you play around with this PDF format?
Yes.
To generate
the
search terms and all that. Yeah.
Yes, good. Okay, so there's actually two scenarios there, and two quite important scenarios, which gets back to that sort of digital content acquisition and thinking through that workflow of how it will get into the system. One is the most precious if it's born digital. If you can get to the source where it's created, then you can use that to go directly into the system. And there's historical capture for that valuable previous sessions of Parliament, where you may be scanning the document, and as well as the scanning, there's the workflow. And that's what this submission workflow is all about. It's designing what's mandatory to capture when the document is submitted into the digital library. And systems like DSpace have an integrated workflow that helps you do a structured submission form where some things for particular document types are mandatory, some things are optional, some things can be repeated or not. Like a subject, you might have multiple subjects, but there might be only one publisher. You might say the publisher is optional, but we must have a title and we must have a date. So this is all part of the workflow process for the capture of your metadata. They sit hand in glove. The workflow and the metadata both need to be conceptualized and designed for your digital repository. Is the source coming from born digital, and can I therefore use document properties to extract all that information straight away and save a lot of work? Or am I building up through scanning? Scanning is the first element and OCR is the second, and the workflow is the third, where you have a structured process that says, take this document, prompt for the metadata that will be captured, and I'll take you through some examples of exactly how those can be structured. So for this particular type of document, this is the type of information that will capture when we're building that document. And obviously there's other ways like systems integration with other open source systems where you're binding different information sources within your institution together. Perhaps not so relevant for Parliament, but certainly with a lot of the libraries that I deal with, they might have a records management system internally. And you do some systems integration work that is to directly connect from, say, DSpace to your internal TRIM or other records management system to directly import documents from that internal records management system into the digital archive. Okay, yes, good.
I think it's somebody's using Alfresco as their records management system. So you know that's a really good example of that in a parliament. So completely critical for us because the records of Parliament are really important records for any country.
Yes. Yes. So you might have that's a great example then, and you may have an internal system which is a transient system for daily use, where you're connecting to that with a bit of systems integration to harvest it for long-term preservation. So your digital library might be the place where it's permanently stored, and there might be some internal systems that are used transiently but quite important for immediate lookup, and your repository is sitting there and drawing in those information resources again in digital form directly into the system.
I think in our case we're using both the scanned documents as well as the soft copies. But I think I remember last year, I'm not sure whether it was last year in France or Singapore, at IFLA, they had an iBook scanner which you could choose both formats. You could either choose I think the scanner gave you two options when you were scanning a document. You could either save it in PDF and the other one was Word, I think.
Okay,
I'll go to their booth again, but I remember the scanner it was one of the latest and it gave you two options of saving in both formats.
Yes, actually that's a good example, and there are some rules for web accessibility in designing any system, be it a digital repository or any website. And one of the recommendations of web accessibility is multi-format delivery. So it might be, if your system can do it, to deliver both a Word version of the document and a PDF version of the document, and provide both of them online, and perhaps even a text extract for the document as well, if you can. So yes, an interesting example. So the role of workflow, we're coming up shortly for a tea break. And then we'll do some exercises around metadata and metadata capture and designing the metadata for your system. So the role of workflow is to ensure that you capture the essential metadata out of the document. And it might be through metadata extraction and perhaps validation by the library from a born digital document, or it can be a system to ensure that you capture the essential metadata by an online submission form. And most digital library systems have a built-in workflow system to validate the metadata as you capture it. And after the tea break, we'll look at some examples of designing that metadata and capturing it within your system. And I'll take you through some examples of that metadata design, and we'll do some exercises around that. Any questions now, or should we just break for our tea? And you can bring those questions back in. Cup of tea, everyone? Great.
So when to come back then, Edmund?
15 minutes, is that, yep, that right?
So 11:15?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. Get started again. So, implementing DSpace. It's, or any digital library systems, these days it's not rocket science. It's been done over and over again. I assist lots of different organisations to implement DSpace, and we follow a pretty standard pattern on the implementation. We start off with a project plan, which is all about the discussion with the organisation. Where are you going to source your documents? What documents are born digital? Can we get those? What documents are you going to have a retrospective scanning process, and how will we get those in? Then, once we've built a project plan, we have a metadata discussion. And in the metadata discussion, we build a template. Metadata can sound pretty threatening, but it's actually really quite straightforward. So I've got a spreadsheet up here, which we use... Oh, okay. Yes. With our implementations, that discussion of metadata is all about a mutual discussion about the types of documents that they're going to capture and what information out of the document is essential and what information out of the document is optional. And when you talk metadata, it's really quite straightforward. It's things like the date, the copyright, the edition, the editors. For a standard sort of book type document, you'd recognise these in a library catalogue, you'd recognise them in a digital library system as well. It might be for journals, the journal name, the volume, the issue, and so on. So these are all bread and butter for a library. In a library management system, it might be encoded as MARC, but MARC is metadata. All of this is just metadata. It's the information that's going in. And the sort of round table discussion you have in capturing that metadata is all about what do you need to put in. And once you've decided the type of information that you want to put in the system, you can build a workflow to capture that. And to give you some examples of that, this is for a small library using DSpace. Being small, it was a fairly straightforward setup. The whole project timescale was about 3 months all up. About 1 month for the discussion of the project plan and where the documents are coming from. About 1 month to discuss what information they wanted to capture. This is not a parliamentary library, so theirs is a fairly standard profile for documents going into a digital repository. And then the workflow is simply the process of making sure that you capture all of the information that you must capture in submitting the document. So this is an example of a workflow in DSpace. So the workflow is simply saying, all right, first of all, what type of document am I capturing? And then the next steps will determine the metadata that it asks for based on the type of document. So if I pick a book, then the metadata it's going to ask for are book type metadata things like the title, the editors, the authors, the publisher, the place, all the sorts of things you expect to see with a book type item. And if I pick a journal article, then it will ask all the typical metadata types of things that a journal article has, like the name of the journal, the journal article title, the authors, the date of publication, maybe the link to the URL, the document object identifier, any other particular information fields that you want to capture, with some of them marked with a little asterisk there, which indicates that it must be supplied, which means that the workflow will say, I go next, and it will prompt me with a warning saying you must enter a title or you must provide at least one author. So these are workflow rules. most digital repository systems have a workflow management system associated with them, as well as a metadata system. So the building of the institutional repository is the design of the metadata, which is a human decision process, and the design of the workflow, which is simply configuration of the system. And the discussion of the metadata is simply a matter of looking at what you need to capture. So with a book, it's pretty straightforward. It's well known the sorts of things you need to. You want the title, you want the author, you want the publisher, you want the date. Some metadata will be specific to your institution. So, for instance, you might want to capture the news clipping. So what, in a workshop in gathering metadata, what typically I will gather is a spreadsheet which describes each of the document types that they're trying to capture. Then as part of the discussion, we'll say, well, for a, perhaps let's have a look at an Act of Parliament. We've got an empty table here because we haven't really agreed what we need to capture for an Act of Parliament. Well, what do we need to capture for an Act of Parliament? What are some of the things that... Anyone got some suggestions?
Session, the session of Parliament.
Session, good. So I'll put in the session. Anything else? Sponsor, yeah, good. Anything else? Yeah, good. Yep. Title or act.
Date.
Or date. The which? The sitting number of Parliament. Oops, hang on.
Subject.
Yep. Subject. You might also want to capture member names, members mentioned, or members speaking. Yes?
When we say the sitting number, is it, well, I don't know, maybe a different country, but in Ghana we have the number given to the Act.
Yes.
That particular legislation have a unique number.
Yes. So you would have the Act number, a unique number for the Act, and the session of Parliament. So it might be the seventh sitting of Parliament, or it might be, yes. So
the Act number or the bill number would also be.
So you have, that's another one we need, and we haven't got. So the Act
It's an Act.
number.
They want to associate it with the committee.
The committee.
The committee responsible for submitting the bill, yes?
Some of them have
Yep.
What's that?
Agenda, yes, okay. The agenda that it relates to.
First reading, second reading, committee stage.
Yep. Stage of bill. So the stage of bill might be first reading, second reading. So here's an example of, all right, well, we've got something like the stage of bill. What sorts of examples? It might be first reading, second reading. And these might be authorised values. So when we talk about an authorised value, it's a structured term. You don't type it in, it's selected from a list. And the same might be for subjects. You don't type a subject in, you select it from a list. Yes?
Is it in building such a data, is it preferable to separate acts, the acts from the bills? But the bills, they need some updating as it progresses. So is it better to do a separate database for the acts parliaments than a separate database for the bills?
So this is an interesting question. Is it worth having a separate section for the acts and for the bills, one of which might change and be updated more frequently, and the other which is the settled final.
We had this discussion over morning tea, and acts and bills are more complicated documents to have in your repository than agendas and minutes of meetings, but they are more important. So they are far more significant because the major role of any parliament is the making of legislation, and this is the capturing of that process to share with the people. Yes. So in terms of recommending what you would have, all the bills, so that the people can see how the Parliament has changed the bills, and then make it also, but you do need to make it very clear what is the final act, so what was passed by Parliament. So what you're wanting to capture ideally is Parliament's intent and how it changed the bill from the way it was introduced to the way it was finally passed. That's the ideal.
Yes.
So I would not recommend getting rid of bills once you have moved through that process, but being able to keep a track of how the Parliament changed the bill, and you would use the metadata to help you to. So this is we're talking about into the repository. The repository holds all these documents, and then ideally you would be drawing documents from the repository up to your website, and on the website it would probably be arranged differently so that it was easier to find the act than it was to find the bills, but that if you found the act, that you could trace back from the act the earlier versions of the bill, so you could see what Parliament had decided. That is the ideal.
Yes. Within most digital repositories you can also decide what's publicly visible and what's work in progress visible only perhaps to committees, and which committees have visibility of that. So those are sort of the security metadata around the system, which you can also decide. But the importance of separately identifying each metadata field is that everything that's separately identifiable is separately discoverable. So it's quite critical to sort of separate out each individual item that you want to attach. And
I'm not sure either I got him right, but I think he meant like, as it is there, we have combined the acts and the bill with the slash, just to make them like separate entities.
So that suggestion I think is a good one, which is rather than overload a field, if we want to have a metadata item, a separate metadata item describing each one, then separate it out. And I think that's a very valuable point.
The bill number is a really good way of connecting them.
Yes. So that might be the joining point between different documents to identify the connection between them. Everything that's separately identified can be separately made visible then at the end of the day, because it can be made discoverable within the user interface. And when I say discoverable, you may surface things like the author with an index of authors, and the journal title showing what journals, or it might be the Act of Parliament and showing which acts. Everything that's separately identifiable can be separately discoverable and searched on in different ways. So the important process is actually not terribly hard. And if you want to, when we're capturing it, the key things that we need in analysing this metadata are examples of the type of metadata that you're capturing, and in particular, is this a set of standard values, or is it something that's keyed in? Is it repeatable, like a subject or author or member name mentioned? Is it mandatory? And the mandatory one is quite important for the validation of the input into the repository, because most submission forms, most workflows will allow you to define what's mandatory and what's not mandatory. And that gets back to that earlier question that we had, how do you guarantee the quality of your metadata? Well, it's in the submission process, the workflow definition, to say this is essential and this is optional. And that takes the difficulty of the decision making away, because the workflow itself is prompting the people submitting the documents to say, hey, I've missed something out, I need to put something in while I'm submitting to the repository, so that when they go into a given section and they submit to the collection and they pick a particular type, it might be an Act of Parliament, and when they fail to supply something, the workflow rules are prompting them, you didn't put a book title in. Most repositories, such as DSpace, that's configuration, not programming. So when I say configuration, not programming, there might be some settings to change, a setup process, but it's a simple setup process. So the complexity is not in the actual configuration of DSpace to do this, or the workflow. It's actually the analytical work that you do in the library to properly identify the type of metadata that you want to capture. And it's a tricky decision, because if you ask for too much metadata, you make a great burden in the capture process. And it's better to capture it well but efficiently. So if you ask too much, you make a burden. If you ask too little, then you may not be able to discover things effectively out of the metadata collection that you want to put together. The other aspect then if you want to have a play around with that spreadsheet and put some information in there yourself, you'll see there's a tiny URL for that as well, which is a shared spreadsheet document. Yesterday we looked at a shared Word document where you could all go in and capture metadata. If you go into this URL, tinyurl.com, IFLA SA training, that opens up a typical spreadsheet that we use for configuring metadata in an organisation. And you can see I've divided it into headings. So this is a shared worksheet. These shared document architectures are wonderful for collaborative work. And one of the collaborative items of development might be putting together this sort of spreadsheet of metadata, because you can share this spreadsheet, you can break it into the known types of documents, and within parliaments there's some pretty well-known document types that they capture. You capture news clippings, you capture media releases, acts of parliament, minutes of committees, questions to parliament is often a common thing that you want to capture within the digital library. And I've left these as a blank slate, but I think as a workshop at some point, and if we have time today, maybe we'll come back to this document and work around it more, but even as a workshop collaboratively within Parliament, it will be useful to set up a template of standard metadata for parliaments, because this is actually a process which is common to most parliaments. The type of metadata you capture is common to most parliaments, and therefore a standard for sharing that metadata is quite valuable as well. Very useful. Yes. Okay. Now, trying to bring up those slides again. There we go. So I'll give you some examples of actual implementation of DSpace as an example. The New South Wales Parliamentary Library captures their DSpace documents in several ways. They have subscriptions to news publications, which they feed as born digital directly into the repository. So the PDF comes in, DSpace extracts the metadata from the document properties, so they don't retype the information, it's born digital, the PDF comes in, the properties of the document are extracted, and it goes into the repository that way. They have a workflow system designed for that Parliament that also goes to websites and uses RSS, which is a syndication technique, an XML document format, that just has on websites the author and the title and the URL location, and it harvests those documents directly from websites. They use that to capture media releases. So rather than download or print a media release and scan it in and describe it within the system, they go to the member's website and use a standard website technique called RSS to download directly into DSpace using that technology. They also hire a media monitoring organisation to provide PDFs of news items, and that media monitoring organisation also provides it in digital format, so they don't rescan and reload those. And they also have had a major digitisation project where, as you've done, they go through, they scan the documents, they OCR the document, and then they submit through that standard web submission form with all the workflow that defines the rules about what gets submitted to the repository. And the other example is the Northern Territory Library in Australia that has about 300,000 mostly born digital documents, some scanned. They have an image library, which is a statewide image library that anyone can submit to and goes into the digital library for the historical record for the state as a whole. They have the parliamentary record in Acts of Parliament, which is submitted online as digital documents, keyed in digitally, and then the library supplements it with subjects. So in that case, they've actually got a two-stage workflow. The Parliament is responsible for submitting the document into the digital library, but the librarians themselves then review that and add metadata to the document to improve its quality, particularly with things like subject headings. And they get regional newspaper publications. They made an arrangement with the major newspaper publishers to get the newspapers in born digital format. Then they use a system called embargoing, so that it's only available internally in DSpace until a period of 3 months, after which it becomes publicly available within the digital library system. So the embargoing is to meet agreed constraints with the newspaper publisher that they've got a period of time for exclusive public use for the documents, but it's available within the digital library system to a smaller community by that process of embargoing. So that's, again, getting back to the design of your digital library system, these are quite important dialogues. They're not just an internal dialogue of the design of the metadata, but they're also going back to where are these documents coming from? Can I get some born digital documents? Can I go to the source and make sure I get them from source, be it a publisher or be it the internal Hansard capturing of your legislation? Or if I've got a project for scanning of historical documents, building the proper workflow to the agreed standard of metadata. So the agreed standard is that dialogue, because once you've agreed on that standard of metadata, then you can set the rules up in the workflow in the digital library system to enforce that standard. So it takes away that responsibility from the individuals who are submitting documents, because some of those standards are enforced by the workflow. And that, I guess, gets to the essence of building the digital library. A lot of it is the intellectual input you provide to the design of the library, as much as it is about the technological platform that you choose. But in choosing the technological platform, there are some basics which are described in the workbook that you would be looking for, which is that the digital library supports something like harvesting in standard services. So there's a standard for harvesting, and you'd want to make sure that the digital library supports that. There's standards for metadata description, several of them. They're quite interchangeable, so you can use one standard for metadata and transform into other standards for metadata, but to make sure that it is in a standard sort of format.
So I've just been asked by a colleague, where do we get the book?
Okay, yes.
And so I believe that the answer is that my colleague from IPU, Andy Richardson, is arriving today, and he has in his suitcase copies for the countries who are here at the training workshop. So I believe that by the end of the day we will have a copies to share. So it is jointly published by IFLA, by IPU and the UN.
Yes, good. The ebook version is also available online, but I do like having a print version as well. So that's I guess my coverage of digital libraries. We're now going to look at some of the practical implementation of other sorts of services that are readily deployable in your library. And for this we've got the South African Parliament to thank for a very interesting profile.
No, you might want to switch. I'll switch. Okay, good. Thank you very much, Edmund. I promise I won't be long. I know it's been a long morning. And I have a very basic presentation to share with you some of our experiences in developing some of the systems that Edmund's been talking about this morning. And so I'm going to do it more as a practical exercise. Some of the developers have absolutely forbidden me from showing you some of the stuff, but I've decided I will show you some of the content that I built specifically just to demonstrate the concept of some of the technologies that are available. And I saw the program, and it talks about inexpensive solutions for parliaments. And I thought it was a passionate subject of mine because ICT departments around the world, not only in parliaments, are being asked specifically to do a lot more with less. I don't know if any one of you have had an increase in your IT budget in the last 2 or 3 years. I'd be very surprised if you did. And so I think there's a huge pressure for you to try and deliver a better level of service to your customers with fewer resources. So today what I'm going to share with you is some of our experiences, some of the things we had to do to try and provide our information services to members and staff of Parliament and to the public using some of the technologies that are freely available. So just give me a second and I'm going to do a few changes while we get into the presentation. Oh, I lost my mouse. Give me a second. There we go. So I'm just going to change networks. I'm going to close that up. You okay if I shut that down? Yeah, sure. Thanks. It has been a tough few years, I think, financially. The global crisis, of course, has not helped us any, and we've all ended up with having to do far more with very little resources. And one of the things that I'm passionate about is the use of open source in Parliament. And so we've spent a fair amount of time working on a lot of technology that we think will add some value to what you need to do in your own parliaments. Sorry, this one won't go away. Why won't it go away? Come on. Oh, there we go. There's done. Okay. Just close that. Okay, so I'm going to take you through essentially just very quickly through about just 3 basic applications that I think would add value, and some of you might already be using some of these applications, so feel free to share your experiences if I've left anything out. So The three particular areas that I want to focus on is on document management and some e-learning and learning management systems that I know most parliaments are using, but are used widely in the industry and else in other sectors. And then, of course, web content, in particular, intranets, extranets, and your websites. This name, I'm sure all of you have seen at some point, Alfresco. A very powerful document or content management system. Very simple to use, has a number of features that are very relevant and applicable in the parliamentary context. It's web-based, but some of the reasons that we chose Alfresco is, I think if you know our history as a South African parliament, we're a fairly new democracy. And many of our members have come from an era where we're not fully computer literate. Some of them had serious challenges. They were in exile, so they had difficult conditions before our democracy. We had to look for applications that members of parliament could use and didn't require a huge technical or a computer literacy levels. So one of the simplest things we wanted to do was to train our members to use a browser. And it's something that they now do on a daily basis. So we've been building the capabilities of our members and of our staff over the last few years. So everybody essentially knows how to use a web browser. And I think the beauty of it is that it doesn't matter what you do these days, you're going to access most services using a browser. And so we adopted the same principles. So I'm just going to break out of this for a second and fire up the browser and just take you through essentially what we've done without quickly. So most members of parliament, whether they're sitting at home or in the parliamentary precincts, at some point would want to use documents that we have in our repository. So we've pretty much standardized on the URL. So whether you're sitting inside of parliament or outside, the access is pretty much the same. I hope we're connected. Let me just check. No, it doesn't look like it. Oh, there we go.
Take off the DNS setting on it.
Let's just see. Has it done something?
Go to go to Power Wi-Fi.
Let me just see if I can get this one from the outside.
Right.
So I'm just going to switch a little bit. Yeah, you can trust the technology and just go back. We tested
Go back to that one.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back.
And just go to the
Power Wi-Fi.
Yeah, just go to the connect and then
we tried it early on and it
make
worked.
sure it's on standard DNS.
Yeah, I'm just going to just try one more time. We just gave it a shot early on and he did set it up for me, so let's just see and go back. Let's go back. You changed the DNS on?
Just let me have a look on the properties and where's that mouse gone?
Yeah.
Hang on a minute. We can't change the
I think I'll change that.
we can't.
No, I don't think they changed it. I think you left it. Let me just stop and start and see if it'll do it again.
Maybe. That's what we should. Oh, here we go. That's what we want. So this is your one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Properties. reckon we need to.
Do they change that?
Take
Oh,
off
just put that. Yeah, I think you're right. That should fix it. Yes.
Close. And
just connect.
Give that a shot again.
Is it up there? Let me just go and try that. Let's go back there.
Yes.
Okay. We're in business. Okay, so I'm going to log on to the interface quickly. Please don't look at my password. No, you can't see it. And we won't remember that one. I think you know why. So we're going to go, let's log on. Okay, so in essence, when a member of parliament, that's compressed a little. I think it's just the resolution of the screen. But when a member logs on, he gets to see a number of things. And this is my interface, so not a member of parliament. And we have a very customized interface for our members. But this is, in essence, what I see every morning when I get to work. So we use it as our central repository for all of our content. We've been implementing it for the last 2 years, and it's served us very well. So let's start with the cost aspect. And if I could share with you our experience, the previous system that we had, and I'm not going to mention any names, I don't think it's a marketing exercise today, but we had a very proprietary application that we used for a number of years. And the cost was phenomenal. The initial cost of implementing it cost us literally millions and millions of rands. And supporting it over the 5 years or 6 years that we had the application cost us a fair amount. In licensing costs, in skills that we had to bring in training, in infrastructure. And so the demands on the infrastructure were quite substantial. So when we came to the end of life for that particular application, we searched far and wide for a number of applications. And again, we went through all of the current content management systems that are available. And there are a huge variety of systems that are available. So you're spoiled for choice. We narrowed it down to 2 applications, which is SharePoint, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, which is in the Microsoft stable of applications. And we narrowed it down to Alfresco. And of course, the cost of Alfresco could not compare with SharePoint. SharePoint is a proprietary system. It is a costly application. But it wasn't the only reason that we chose Alfresco. We chose it simply because it was closest to what we needed. And the beauty of it was that we could integrate it with our Office application. So whether you were using Office 2010 or Office 2013 on your desktop, and I love that word that I learned a new term today called Born Digital, which is exciting term. I'm going to use it to the rest of Parliament for the next few days and share it with our members. So many of our documents at Parliament are born digital. Whether it's on a browser type application, people are creating documents, Hansard on an editor that they used to transcribe on, or simply researchers and librarians and all kinds of staff members who are producing documents on a daily basis. And so I don't have to tell you that we're an information-driven organization. That's the lifeblood of this organization called Parliament. We use it on a daily basis. We create it, we share it, we extract information and knowledge from it. So it, in essence, is what drives our business. So this interface is fairly simple for us. I've customized it because this is what makes sense to me. But the beauty of it is that you could quite easily go in and change the profile, the settings of anything that you wanted. And change, essentially, let's see if we can get to the bottom of our browser. So my workspaces, the way they set out, is really the things that I need to do on a daily basis. So I can see tasks that are assigned to me. And in essence, members or anybody that's using the repository will have exactly the same interface. So there's a workflow system that's built into it that allows you to create these complex workflows. and you can create them as tasks. I can have a look at workflows that I've started, and these are the ones that are currently pending or in process, due today, ones that thankfully I've met all my deadlines, so you can see that there's nothing due today, tomorrow or the next 7 days. So I'm pretty much up to date with my work. You're setting a new workflow is fairly easy. You can start one and send it to multiple people. And so I think that's really the value proposition for us, because we can send workflows in multiple unidirectional or multi-directional workflows to many people. Review processes are far easier. And of course, when people are not responding to particular documents, you can also see where the bottlenecks are in the institution. And I think that's really what we're struggling with. So I'm not going to take you through the entire workflow, but I think the beauty of what it is that we set up, and here I've only listed the sites that I have access to. And these are the key sites that I work with on a daily basis, and these are the units that report to me directly. The division is ICT, so we're a division. We have a number of business units under us, and this is really where we store everything. Every document that we produce, whether it's a memo, an invoice, or we send it on in the workflows, it's available. Security is built in, so we set the models, etc., etc. And for us, the other beauty of it was that we had members of parliament who preferred not to use this interface. And you'll notice that every time I start selecting an application, I mention the members of parliament, because I think the key here is that the members of parliament are our key customers as a parliament. They are the people that perform the core business of parliament. The administration exists to assist and serve the members in their fulfillment of their constitutional mandate. And that's really the principle with which we use to design our systems. So members of parliament often prefer to use what is often called shared drives. And many of you who've worked in the Microsoft environment previously would know the concept of shared drives. And that's their history, and that's what they prefer to work with. The beauty of Alfresco, it allows us to create that kind of environment, whether you're sitting in Parliament or outside of Parliament. So we can create a shared drive even if you're sitting in a conference somewhere overseas, and the moment you log on, we're able to create that kind of environment for you. So you don't really change the way you work. We don't have to teach you a new way of working when you leave the institution. So whether you're sitting at home or you're working in the office at Parliament, the experience is the same. So the idea was to build a system around our users and ensure that our members of Parliament and the staff have the same experience, whether they're inside or outside of the organization. That we would use access systems that would be simple and they're familiar with. Everybody uses Facebook and they use Google, they use numerous websites. So we didn't change the designs fundamentally. So for us, it doesn't matter where I'm sitting in the organization. I can always access my documents, whether it's under administration. And we have a very defined folder structure for each of the units. So you will see exactly the same folder structure in every site that we create. It's just a matter of change management. So it doesn't matter where in the organization you go. If you're looking for a document, you'll find it at least in a location that is at the higher level in terms of the folders. That's where it is. And that's important for us because of familiarity, location of documents, sharing of documents, workflows, records. Of course, I heard the idea of people mention records. So when a document has gone through its full life cycle, we have a records management unit that looks at it and decides how to classify it and at which point that document becomes a record. But the location of the document will always be in the same place, depending on which site. So that, in essence, is the content management system. Of course, we've deployed a number, and we've customized a number of the applications here for our own purpose. And we've written a couple of scripts to assist us. And that's the beauty of open source solutions, is that you have the source code, There are developers all over the world that are working on applications that can assist you. You don't really have to spend those millions of rands or dollars in developing the technology. We download a lot of the source code, we adapt it, and we use it. Of course, whatever changes we bring back, we publish back for other users as well. So this, in essence, is the idea around content management. The other application that I wanted to share with you, which I thought would be useful, is the web content applications. Many of you are deploying websites, you're deploying intranets, extranets, and there is a need to have an application that you, oops, I think I put a plus at the end. It shouldn't be there. And you need to deploy these, but the challenge has always been for this Parliament, as well as others, is the issue around content, is getting content into those applications and ensuring that they are managed properly. There's no point in having state-of-the-art applications if the content is outdated or irrelevant. And obviously all the criteria associated with data and information. Now this, I sat this morning and a little bit yesterday evening to put together for you to demonstrate the ease of use of a particular application. And in this case, we're using WordPress. Some of you may have heard of it. A very powerful application, and I'm told, if the statistics are to be believed, that it powers anything from 10 to 20% of the intranet and internet sites. Very functional, very simple, very easy to use. We're currently using it to redesign our intranet. So our current intranet looks something like this. I'll just pop it up for you so you can see. And again, we built that on a proprietary system, and you can see the ASPX obviously at the end means Microsoft. And so when we looked for technologies to replace what we currently have, because this intranet is about 7 years old now, we decided we will again go back to the market. We looked at all the available systems, and we chose WordPress. Now this is something, and I'm not a web designer by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm simply somebody who knows a little bit about technology, and I managed to do this in the space of about an hour or two. And just quickly try to emulate and copy what we have. So we have similar functions, main systems, and I simply just built on these. And this, in essence, is WordPress. So whether you're building your local intranet, all it requires is perhaps a little bit of training on the administration of WordPress, which is fairly easy. It's all menu driven. Again, and the beauty of it is operates within a web browser. The deployment, of course, may require some skill. And again, our base operating systems at Parliament is on Linux. We use it again. It is an open source application, operating system. And there's a number of benefits of using Linux over Windows. But I'm told that you could also run WordPress on a Windows environment if you chose to do so. Your decision here would be based on your skill levels and the availability of skills in your own parliaments or in the countries that you reside in. If there are a fair amount of open source skills, Linux skills, then I would encourage you to build it on a Linux environment. However, if there is a leaning towards the Microsoft operating system, then by all means, please use it. So I think, so whether you're building a fully fledged parliamentary website or you're doing an intranet, WordPress is as simple as you can get. And I sat, I think, for just an hour or two just to look at some of the systems that we were using, even in the list of systems. So if you look at, many of you would recognize that name, Bongeni. Again, you should be proud that Bongeni is a wholly African product, developed in Africa, for African parliaments. And I think that's the beauty of it, is it's a very powerful tool. And we're currently using it and customizing it for our own use here at Parliament. And I'm sure in the conference I saw screenshots of the mobile app that we're developing being sent through. So I think in the course of the conference you're going to be introduced to that application. And Bungeni is the back-end system that we use to manage all of our committees and the committee meetings and the scheduling. And that's really where its strength lies.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Bungeni came on the scene alongside Akomatoso. So are you using Akomatoso in some way? Or?
Absolutely. Yes. We adopted the schema about 3 years ago. We've customized it a bit. But more recently, I think it was adopted by Oasis. And I think it was published in terms of the standard. So it has managed to get worldwide recognition and adoption. I'm told that the US is using it. A few other parliaments are considering it. And we've certainly adopted it. And again, it's a product that was developed together with UNDESA, and I think an IPU had some input in there. So, yeah, we have. Some of the more basic open source solutions that we've used that really we developed in-house, we have an application that we use to book our committee rooms. So we have 30-odd committee rooms, which are in great demand. We have 53 committees, but we have a limited amount of committee rooms. So we have to ensure that our venues are used optimally. So we developed a system that allows us to manage this online. And there are administrators that book systems and can view the availability on any particular day, on which venues are available, which ones are not. I'm not an administrator, so I can't tell you too much, but if I had to look at the Good Hope Chamber, I can tell you that the Good Hope Chamber has been booked for the entire day for the library unit. I'm assuming it has something to do with this conference. It's the one that's right at the top, I suspect you're going to be using. And again, it's been booked part of the time, but I thought there's the meeting, the House is sitting today, and again, library. So it's an open source solution. We developed it in-house, and we maintain it in-house. How much time do I have? Should I wrap it up?
I think 12:30 is when we're wrapping up, isn't it? So, yep.
Okay. So, all right.
So, what's this? When you say this is an open source solution, is it published as open source? You developed it, but you've made it open source.
Yeah, we've published the code on Google Code, and so we've made it available for anybody who wants to take it up and develop it further.
Good. Okay. That's an example of the nature of open source. Many library systems like Koha were developed by one particular library network and then gifted to the world to use. And then others have then joined in and contributed to that software. So Koha is an open source library management system, and there's hundreds of developers around the world, literally around the world, thousands actually, who contribute to the gradual development of the software. So some can just use the software, and some can actually improve the software, and both those options are available.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're pretty open to sharing whatever we have in terms of code with other parliaments, and we've had requests in the past. But I must say that other parliaments have also been very generous in sharing their information with us, source codes, application, documentation, and I think that's the nature of the community of parliaments, whether it's in Africa or in the rest of the world. Often parliaments are very willing to share both their intellectual property as well as their source code. So I would encourage you to make contact with parliaments that are doing great work in ICT and in other areas, and hopefully they can share their experiences with you as well. I must say that we've benefited quite a bit from a lot of the work that was done by the Global Center for ICT in Parliaments. They've done quite a bit of work through in INDESA-funded activities. The IPUs managed to put us in touch with other parliaments where we managed to learn quite contact quite a bit, the European Parliament, I think in part. We've also made contact with the Brazilian Parliament, and we've learned. As soon as I can get Moodle to come up, this is probably one of the ones that we're particularly proud of, because we deployed it as a learning management system. One of our challenges, of course, is trying to get members of Parliament to a classroom to learn. I can see I'm not alone with this challenge. The difficulty here, of course, is I think the nature of the work and the areas that they have to cover. So we decided to perhaps just look at some more innovative ways of trying to get the members trained, because computer literacy training under applications, etc. So whenever we deploy something new, it is always a challenge for us to get the members to come. Let me just try that again. I hope we can get it right. I don't know if I'm missing something, but we'll try. So what we did was to look at other more innovative ways to train our members. And one of the areas that we came up was to make content available online through an e-learning platform. And Moodle was really again, we went out to the marketplace, we looked at what was available, and we found that Moodle was widely adopted. There were a lot of content available. A lot of people were publishing content. We managed to get a lot of multimedia content available from various sources, and I was hoping to show you some of the videos that we published. So one of the things we did was we produced a number of videos. We also spoke to some of our suppliers around multimedia content, for example, basic computer training. We have a number of videos related to that. We publish it on the learning management system, and members can connect and staff can connect at their leisure. So whether you're sitting at home and you have a few minutes to go through a training course, you can go through the video, you can stop it at any time. The system will track the point in time where you actually stopped and exited, and the next time you come in and you start that same video, it will start up at the moment that you exited. There are training tests, there are training examples, there are interactive dashboards that you can go through. And again, you don't have to spend 3 hours going through the entire training course. You can stop at any time. It will save a point-in-time record of where you were. The next time you log on to the system, it will start you up at that point and take you through the course. And the beauty of it is that we can now track which members and which staff have actually completed certain courses. So we make it sometimes mandatory for you to go through the training course before we will install an application on your desktop or your computer. Which makes a lot of sense, considering that the moment you deploy new technology, if you haven't trained people, and if you haven't managed the expectation, and if you haven't climatized them to the application, you're always going to have challenges in its use, and it could very well turn out to be a white elephant. That means a very expensive application that you spent a lot of resources deploying, and it is underutilized in your organization for one reason and one reason only, is the change management and the training aspect. So Moodle is the key in that strategy. I'm sorry I couldn't get it to work. I'm not sure what the issue is. And I don't want to spend too much of time, but you can talk to me afterwards, and I'm happy to give you any information that you may need. There are other applications that we've deployed over the years, but we're a little short on time, and I'm happy to share those with you if you so wish. I hope I've given you something to think about and something that you can take back to your parliament. But feel free to chat to myself. I see Halbert's walked back in, and we'll try and share any information that we have for you. So thank you very much.
Okay. I think we're ready to break for lunch now. Where are we having the lunch?
Same place where we went yesterday for lunch. We're going to the same place. Yes.
Okay. And I'd like to thank the Parliament again for providing such